I've been up to it now. It's bad.
Okay. Okay, and are they breathing?
No, ma'am.
Okay, and you said it's your wife and your son?
My wife and my son.
That chilling 911 call would kick off one of the most shocking murder cases not just this small county had ever seen, but the entire country. For decades, the Murdaugh family name carried power, money, and influence. They were the people who prosecuted criminals, won cases, and seemed completely untouchable. From the outside, they looked like the perfect Southern family. But behind closed doors, something much darker was hiding. Because what happens when the family known for upholding the law becomes the center of a brutal double murder investigation? As police started uncovering more details, the story only became more disturbing. Secrets, lies, and suspicious deaths began surfacing one after another, and the deeper investigators looked, the more terrifying the truth became. This is the horrifying story of the Murdaugh family massacre, and how the people everyone trusted may have been hiding something evil all along. The Murdaugh family had controlled the legal system in South Carolina's Low Country for 86 consecutive years. 3 generations of men named Randolph Murdaugh served as the chief prosecutor for the state's 14th Judicial Circuit from 1920 to 2006. The region covered 5 counties. Locals simply called it Murdaugh Country. Not a nickname the family rejected, a title they lived up to. Their law firm, PMPED, was just as dominant. Hampton County juries were notorious for handing out enormous verdicts against corporations, and the Murdaughs were brilliant at steering cases there. The American Tort Reform Association once labeled Hampton County one of the worst judicial hellholes for defendants in the entire nation. Companies stopped doing business in the county altogether rather than risk going up against them. The firm even earned the nickname the house that CSX built after a series of crushing settlements against the railroad giant. In other words, if you were a Murdaugh, the world bent around you. And Alex Murdaugh had grown up knowing that his entire life. Alex was born in 1968. He earned his law degree from USC and joined the family firm as a partner. He was never considered the sharpest legal mind in the room. What he had was charm, a natural, almost magnetic ability to work people. His firm's own CFO once called it the art of BS. Alex could walk into a room full of strangers and walk out with their trust, their money, and their gratitude. His wife, Maggie, was his college sweetheart. They married in 1993, and everyone who knew her described her the same way: warm, genuine, and completely devoted to her sons. She was not defined by the Murdaugh name. She was simply a good person who happened to marry into it. Their older son, Buster, was following his father's path toward law school until he was reportedly expelled from USC's program for plagiarism. Alex allegedly spent around $60,000 trying to get him readmitted. Their younger son, Paul, was a different story entirely. Volatile, reckless, and known for drinking heavily. But he was loved deeply, by his mother especially. On paper, the Murdaughs had everything. A 1,770-acre estate called Moselle, complete with shooting ranges, duck ponds, dog kennels, and a sprawling main house. Multiple properties, multiple boats, generations of wealth and influence. It looked like the perfect life. And for a long time, people were happy to believe it was. However, the first real crack in the Murdaugh image came in February 2019, and it came because of Paul. In the early hours of February 24th, Paul was behind the wheel of a boat carrying 5 other young adults near Beaufort, South Carolina. He had been drinking all evening, buying alcohol with his brother's ID, stopping at a bar, taking shots. At 2:17 in the morning, the boat slammed full speed into a piling on the Archers Creek Bridge. 3 passengers were thrown into the water. 2 were pulled out alive. The third, 19-year-old Mallory Beach, was not. Her body was found a week later, miles from the crash. What happened next said everything about who this family really was. Before police could even take Paul's statement, Alex and his father showed up at the hospital and shut it down. No statement. Alex reportedly went room to room among the survivors, urging at least one of them to stay quiet about who was driving. Despite the interference, witness accounts were strong enough to charge Paul with 3 felony counts, including one for Mallory's death. He was never handcuffed. His mugshot was taken on someone's iPhone in a hallway. He never sat in a holding cell. The gap between how Paul was handled and how any other person would have been processed was impossible to ignore. Mallory's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit. That lawsuit required a detailed financial audit of the Murdaugh estate, and for a man hiding what Alex was hiding, that was catastrophic. June 7, 2021 began like any other summer evening. Alex was in the office. The housekeeper had made dinner and left it on the stove. Maggie and Paul were both called out to the Moselle estate. It was supposed to be a quiet family night. Here is what the evidence shows. At 8:44 p.m., Paul recorded a short video near the dog kennels and sent it to his friend Rogan Gibson. In the background of that video, a second voice can be heard, a voice that multiple people would later confirm, without hesitation, belonged to Alex. At 8:49 p.m., both Maggie and Paul's phones went completely dark, locked, never used again. At 10:06 p.m., Alex called 911. He told the dispatcher he had just come home from visiting his mother and found his wife and son dead near the kennels. He was hysterical. He said he had touched the bodies to check for a pulse. He mentioned Paul had been receiving threats over the boat crash. When first responders arrived, they found Paul had been shot twice with a 12-gauge shotgun, once in the chest at close range and once in the head. Maggie had been shot 5 times with a .300 Blackout semi-automatic rifle as she tried to flee, with the final bullet fired into the back of her skull at close range. There was no sign of forced entry. Nothing was stolen. The murder weapons were nowhere to be found. 2 people who loved and trusted whoever approached them that night were dead, and the only person confirmed to have been on that property with them was Alex Murdaugh. When investigators first spoke to Alex, his story was simple. He had been visiting his ailing mother all evening and returned home to find the bodies. He was nowhere near the kennels earlier that night. He said it firmly, repeatedly, without hesitation. Then came Paul's phone. The South Carolina Law Enforcement Division eventually cracked the passcode. It was Paul's own birthday, April 14, 1999. Inside was the kennel video. The video that placed Alex's voice at the scene just minutes before the estimated time of death. The video that blew his alibi apart completely. Faced with proof he couldn't deny, Alex changed his story. He admitted he had been at the kennels. He blamed his opioid addiction for the lie, claiming the paranoia had clouded his judgment. But the evidence kept coming. General Motors provided SLED with OnStar data from Alex's Chevy Suburban. The data confirmed his route that night and showed that Maggie's phone, found the following morning along his travel path, had almost certainly been thrown from his window on the way to his mother's house. It also showed that Alex arrived at his mother's home for far less time than he claimed, directly contradicting a key part of his alibi. Most damning of all, OnStar recorded that Alex arrived back at the kennels and placed the 911 call just 17 seconds after parking. 17 seconds. Not enough time to find 2 bodies, check for a pulse, process what he was seeing, and dial emergency services. Not even close. Investigators also discovered that several calls between Alex and Maggie and Paul on the night of the murders had been deleted from Alex's phone, but were still visible on the victims' phones. He had tried to erase the trail. He just forgot that phones work both ways. On top of that, gunshot primer residue was found on Alex's hands and the clothing he wore that night. A caretaker at his mother's home reported seeing him carry a tarp in the days after the murders. Investigators believed the missing weapons may have been inside it. Neither were ever recovered. SLED ruled out every other possible suspect. Every single one. Alex Murdaugh was the only person with the means, the motive, and the opportunity. The only question left was why. For roughly 16 years, from 2005 to 2021, Alex Murdaugh had been systematically stealing from his own clients, people who came to him at the lowest points of their lives, accident victims, grieving families, people who had no one else to fight for them. Alex looked them in the eye, shook their hands, and took everything. He created a fake bank account called Forge to impersonate the legitimate company Forge Consulting, routing client settlements into accounts only he could access. He lied directly to clients about what they had won in court, pocketing the difference. He conspired with a bank CEO to generate fraudulent personal loans funneled straight back to him. He brought in other attorneys, sometimes unwittingly, to help move money he had no right to. When it was all counted, over 100 separate charges, at least 18 victims, tens of millions of dollars stolen. 2 cases stand out for their sheer cruelty. Hakeem Pinckney was a young man left deaf and quadriplegic after a 2009 car accident. Alex represented him, and when Hakeem died in 2011 after his ventilator was mysteriously disconnected, Alex stole nearly $400,000 from the settlement his grieving mother received. By some accounts, that was almost everything she had won. Gloria Satterfield had worked as the Murdaugh family housekeeper and nanny for 17 years. In 2018, Alex told authorities she had tripped over the family dogs and suffered a fatal head injury. Her death certificate listed natural causes. No autopsy was performed. Alex then told her sons to sue him so his homeowner's insurance would pay, directed them to hire his friend and colleague Corey Fleming as their attorney, and then watched as the insurers paid out approximately $4.3 million, not a single dollar of which went to Gloria's sons. Alex and Fleming split it between themselves. Fleming was disbarred and sentenced to nearly 14 years in prison. Alex was ordered to repay the settlement and was later hit with a $14.8 million judgment from one of his insurance companies. By mid-2021, the Mallory Beach lawsuit had triggered a financial audit. PMPED's CFO had confronted Alex about nearly $800,000 in missing funds. A formal financial hearing was scheduled for just 3 days after the murders. That is why Maggie and Paul Murdaugh died. Not in a fit of rage, not in a moment of madness, but because Alex Murdaugh looked at the two people who loved him most and calculated that their deaths would buy him sympathy, flood the news cycle, and distract the world from what was about to be exposed. He chose himself. However, even with all this overwhelming evidence, Alex's oldest son, Buster, still stands by him and believes he's innocent. In his first interview, he opened up and said,
"I don't think that he could be affiliated with endangering my mother and brother."
Are you fearful for your life if you believe the killer is still out there?
Absolutely. I think that I've set myself up to be safe, but yes, when I go to bed at night, I have a fear that there is somebody else still out there.
The murders of Maggie and Paul were not the only deaths surrounding the Murdaugh name. Stephen Smith was a 19-year-old nursing student found dead in the middle of Sandy Run Road in Hampton County on July 8, 2015. At first glance, it appeared to be a hit and run, but responding troopers noted no skid marks, no vehicle debris, and no injuries consistent with being struck by a moving car. There was blunt force trauma to his head and an unexplained wound above his eye. His car was found miles away with the gas tank door hanging open. The Murdaugh name appeared repeatedly throughout Stephen's case file, specifically Buster's name, as he and Stephen had been classmates with rumored ties beyond friendship. One tip reportedly claimed a man was told by Randy Murdaugh, Alex's brother, to call about Stephen's death. The case was reopened in 2021 following the Murdaugh investigation, and SLED officially ruled it a homicide in March 2023. As of 2026, it remains unsolved. Stephen Smith's family has been waiting for answers for 10 years. Now, 3 months after the murders, Alex resigned from PMPED as the fraud investigation closed in. The day after his resignation, he claimed he had been shot in the head by an unknown assailant while changing a tire on a rural road. The next day, he checked himself into rehab for opioid addiction, a dependency on oxycodone that had been costing him upwards of $50,000 a week at its worst. Nobody believed it, and they were right. Alex had hired his own drug supplier, a man named Curtis Edward Smith, to kill him on that roadside. The plan was to make it look like a random attack so that a $10 million life insurance policy would pay out to Buster. Alex claimed he did it out of desperation. The fraud was unraveling, his career was over, and his wife and son were dead. He said it was a twisted act of love for his surviving son. Curtis Smith's version was different. He said he showed up, fired into the air, and left, that he never shot Alex at all. Either way, Alex was charged with insurance fraud, conspiracy, and filing a false police report. The man who had once been the most powerful attorney in the Low Country was now unraveling in real time, in public, for the entire country to watch. Alex Murdaugh was indicted on 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of possession of a weapon during a violent crime in July 2022. He pleaded not guilty. The trial began January 23, 2023 in Walterboro, South Carolina, with Judge Clifton Newman presiding. Before a single witness was called, one of the most important battles had already been won. The prosecution argued that Alex's financial crimes must be presented to the jury as evidence of motive. The defense argued it would unfairly prejudice him. Judge Newman sided with the prosecution. The jury was entitled to know why a man might want the world looking somewhere else. That ruling was decisive. The prosecution's case was built on layers. Ballistics experts linked shell casings at the crime scene to the Murdaugh family's own weapons. OnStar and phone data placed Alex at the kennels and shredded his alibi timeline. Rogan Gibson testified to hearing Alex's voice during that 8:44 p.m. call with Paul, and the kennel video was played for a jury that could hear for themselves who was standing near those dogs just minutes before Maggie and Paul's phones went permanently dark. The defense had no murder weapon, no fingerprints, no eyewitness, and no blood on Alex's clothes. They pushed a two-shooter theory, suggesting two different weapons meant two different killers, and questioned the integrity of the investigation itself, noting that rain fell overnight and family members had been allowed onto the property before the scene was fully processed. Alex's son Buster took the stand and, with obvious emotion, described his father as a devoted and loving family man. It was the most humanizing moment the defense had. Then Alex took the stand himself. For roughly 10 hours across 2 days, he answered every question and cried through some of them. He admitted he had been at the kennels earlier that night. He admitted he had lied about it. He blamed his opioid addiction. And through tears, he described finding Paul. It was so bad. My boy was lying face down. I could see his brain lying on the sidewalk. I didn't know what to do. He wanted the jury to believe that whatever else he had done, he loved his family. He would never hurt them. Prosecutor Crichton Waters didn't accept that. One juror later said that when Alex took the stand and they heard his voice, they recognized it from the kennel video. That was all they needed. On March 2nd, 2023, after less than 3 hours of deliberation, the jury came back on all 4 counts. Guilty. Alex showed almost no emotion. He was sentenced the next day to 2 consecutive life sentences without parole. Judge Newman noted that people had been given the death penalty for less than what Alex Murdaugh had done. Attorney General Alan Wilson addressed the courtroom. Today's verdict proves that no one, no matter who you are in society, is above the law. Alex later pleaded guilty to 22 state fraud charges and received 27 years in state prison, and to 22 federal charges, receiving 40 years in federal prison in April 2024. The dynasty was done, or so it seemed. On May 13, 2026, the South Carolina Supreme Court issued a unanimous 5-0 ruling that shocked the nation. Alex Murdaugh's murder convictions were overturned, both life sentences vacated, a new trial ordered, not because of new evidence of innocence, because of someone who was supposed to protect the integrity of the trial and instead weaponized it for personal gain. Colleton County Clerk of Court Rebecca Becky Hill had been assigned to manage the jury during Alex's trial. She was trusted, she was official. She was also writing a book about the case, titled Behind the Doors of Justice, The Murdaugh Murders, and a high-profile conviction would be excellent for sales. According to the court's 27-page ruling, Hill had spoken to jurors in ways that were deeply improper. She reportedly told them, before the defense had even presented its case, not to let the defense confuse or convince them. She implied that Murdaugh's testimony should not be trusted. She privately nudged 12 people who were supposed to weigh only the evidence, and she nudged them toward a guilty verdict. The court wrote, Hill placed her fingers on the scales of justice, thereby denying Murdaugh his right to a fair trial by an impartial jury. And then, pointedly, as her book's title suggests, it turns out Hill was quite busy behind the doors of justice, thwarting the integrity of the very system she was sworn to protect. The book was pulled from publication after plagiarism allegations surfaced before it ever reached shelves. Hill has since pleaded guilty in a separate proceeding to lying under oath about what she said and did to those jurors. The court also ruled that the trial judge went too far in allowing the full volume of financial crime evidence into the murder trial, that the breadth of fraud presented to the jury exceeded what a constitutionally fair proceeding allows. Here is what matters most. Alex Murdaugh is not walking free. He is currently serving a 40-year federal sentence for stealing approximately $12 million from his clients. He will stay in prison regardless of the murder case outcome. But legally, he is no longer a convicted murderer of his wife and son. State Attorney General Alan Wilson announced that his office will retry the case as soon as possible. Lead prosecutor Crichton Waters has confirmed he is ready, but the Moselle estate has been sold and demolished. 5 years have passed, memories fade. Physical evidence is gone. Retrying a case this complex, this high profile, and this long after the original crime is a massive undertaking, and no one can say with certainty what a new jury will decide. What we do know is this. Somewhere in South Carolina, people who loved Maggie and Paul Murdaugh are watching this unfold and waiting, again, for something that keeps slipping further away. Maggie Murdaugh was a warm, devoted mother who deserved to grow old, surrounded by the family she gave everything for. Paul was 22 years old with his whole life ahead of him. Complicated, flawed, and deeply loved. Neither of them saw it coming, and the men and women Alex stole from. People like Hakeem Pinkney's mother and Gloria Satterfield's sons, who came to him at their most broken, they trusted him completely. That trust cost them everything. One man spent nearly a century of family reputation on the belief that his name made him untouchable, and when the walls finally started closing in, he made the worst possible choice a human being can make. Now, with the conviction overturned and a retrial on the horizon, the question of justice for Maggie and Paul remains open, and that is a very hard thing to sit with. So I want to know what you think. Was the Supreme Court right to overturn the conviction over what Becky Hill did? Is what she did enough to wipe out a guilty verdict supported by that much evidence? And if there is a retrial, does Alex Murdaugh get convicted again? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If this case affected you the way it affected us, please hit the like button and subscribe so we can keep telling stories like this one. These victims deserve to be remembered. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next one.